I remember meeting with somebody who said, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I thought, what? Like, here you are in a hospital, but literally dying, like you're literally going to die any minute, and you're saying that this is the best thing that ever happened to you, and you wouldn't trade it for anything. And, they would say things like, I used to be just a terrible husband, a terrible father. I didn't care about anybody but myself. I just cared about my job. I was just working all the time. But this diagnosis, this cancer, forced me to be the husband that I should have been, forced me to be the father that I should have been. And it's given me the opportunity to reconcile with my children and restore those relationships.
G'day. Today we're going to be talking about post-traumatic growth with clinical psychologist Carl Gaede. He is the founder of Tutapona, which is a non-profit with a vision to lead individuals that have been affected by war and conflict to emotional recovery. Now, we're going to learn in this episode about the ways that they have been doing that in places like Uganda and Iraq. In fact, alongside fellow clinical psychologist Dr. Robbie Sonderegger, You Belong has teamed up with Carl and Robbie to deliver the groundbreaking GROW program, which is providing trauma, recovery and rehabilitation to newly settled refugee families here in Australia. Carl and his remarkable family are an incredible example of living out their lives with compassion and courage to bring justice and healing to those that have been affected by war and trauma for so many years. And it truly is my pleasure to have this conversation and to share it with you today. Here is my friend, Carl Gaede. Well, Carl, long time no see. How's it going over there in Wisconsin?
Yeah, it's going well. We are gearing up for winter. It's starting to get cold. We've already had some snow fly. You guys over there, you're getting ready for summer, I'm sure. But over here, it's starting to get cold.
Yeah, man, it is so cold over there. I mean, it's where the Green Bay Packers play, and usually it's like snow and ice on the field, isn't it? It's a very cold part of the world in the winter, but you have beautiful summers too, which a lot of people don't realize. Hey.
Yeah, that's right. We've had a beautiful fall. I mean, even just like we had snow, it got cold, but then it warmed up really nice. I was in shorts and a t-shirt yesterday. So it's been really nice, but today got really cold again, and we're starting to gear up for winter.
It's nice to talk about the weather, isn't it? After all the other discussions, and you're in the heart of, I mean, how is America going right now? I mean, you guys are right in the middle of it. How are you feeling personally, man, about all that's going on with the elections and what's going on in your heart and mind, man? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I would just sum it up by saying I'm just really sad in a lot of ways for not just the state of our nation, but the state of the world with, of course, the elections. This is a really divisive time. The elections were difficult, and, people were just fighting about stuff. But even before the elections, just so many things going on with racial injustices, and just our hearts are breaking for our brothers and sisters that just don't have it as good as I have it. And so and our hearts are really breaking for the sins of us and our ancestors, and the sins that just run rampant and leave hurting people behind in their wake. So yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than just kind of this profound sadness and grief for what's been happening.
And thanks for sharing that. I think that's, obviously there's just a lot going on for people, whether it be COVID and the way that's impacted their health and the health of loved ones, or their, jobs and financial situation. You're right, there's this sense of so much pain and division in the world, and I think sadness, that is a really really apt word for this moment. Yeah, and you're certainly one that knows how to carry that grief and that sadness, and to help others to carry that well. As a clinical psychologist yourself, and the work that you've done and that you are doing and continue to do around the world in some of the most hurting and let's just say suffering places on the planet at the moment. And so I'm thankful for your time. First of all, it was wonderful being able to be with you last night, my last night, your early morning, doing some training with some wonderful new kind of programs that you've got launching. And before we get into that, though, which I'd love to just talk a lot about, it's just, I think, so crucial and critical to this moment of how we address this great sadness. How do we address these great injustices that we're experiencing and seeing? I want to take you back to that night on the roof of our house in Kurdistan, Iraq. We must have just met that day, and we were sitting up there with our mutual friend Robbie Sonderegger, and we were just on the roof chatting and talking and just dreaming about what the future might hold in the midst of ISIS and in the midst of craziness that was happening all around us. What comes to mind when you think about that night, Carl?
Yeah, that was an exciting time. That was my first time to the Middle East at all, and then my first time to Iraq. So just learning and seeing it all and just taking it all in. And I remember being really struck by this feeling of when you're there in a place like Iraq, you just feel how ancient it is. You can just feel these sacred lands, this land that people have been walking on for thousands of years. And I found it incredible just being there and meeting the people. And then, of course, learning about the culture, and just things are different. Even when you talk about us being on the roof of your house, it's hard from this context here in the United States to really even understand what that was like. I mean, the houses having that flat roof on the top, and it's really like a picnic area. You go up on the roof and hang out. You had this nice setup up there, and just a great place on the roof of your house to hang out and have a little party. And I remember being with you up there and your family and Robbie, and sitting on the ledge of that house and leaning over, and you feel the warm air, the warm kind of Middle Eastern air, and then looking out on this really sacred land and this place that has had so much pain and has so much joy for hundreds of years. And then thinking about, what if my family did something like your family did, and we just up and moved to Iraq? And Robbie asked me at that point, and I hadn't thought about it at that point because my whole heart had been Africa. I had really just thought up until that point, really, it was all about Africa. And we longed to see people healed and people transformed. But really, my mind had just been on Africa. So then Robbie asked me, could you ever see yourself here? And I remember just looking around and seeing how your family lived and how you guys were doing. And you were doing so well and had a great ministry. You guys were impacting lives. And I thought, I had never thought about it before, but I could see it, I guess. If God called me here, we could do it. We could be here. But Iraq is one of those places that it sure is different than people think. And even to this day, when I come back now and I tell people what it was like there in Iraq, and how I loved it, how my family loved it. My daughters just loved being there and living in Iraq. People will say, man, that's just, I never would have thought Iraq was like that. It's just from what you see on the news and what you hear in different reports, the images that you conjure up in your mind, it's far from the reality. And it was such a beautiful place, such a warm, lovely, hospitable place. Our family loved being there. And then being so close to the front lines with ISIS and so close to the refugee camps and the IDP camps where we were working, it was incredible to be, that close. To just a few minutes, we could be in the camps working with people and hanging out in their tents with them, drinking tea and just being with them. That was incredible. Whereas in Africa, most of the refugee camps we worked at were hours away, and it took quite a while to get there. So it just felt really good to be much more in the action there in Iraq.
You mentioned something about the landscape and the mountains and this sacred land, but also this land that even within itself carries the trauma. And you and I kind of have a shared passion of adventure sports, and I know you love rock climbing and mountain climbing, and I had the opportunity to climb some of the highest mountains there, and we just had lots of fun together. But as you walk on those mountains, every now and then you'll see a sign that say, there's landmines in this area. And you discover quickly, the locals will tell you that there are anywhere between 5 to sometimes 15, the numbers seem to change, but 5 to 15 million undocumented landmines scattered throughout these mountains. In the wars between Iran and Iraq, we lived right on the border. Both you and I, our homes were fairly close to those borders, and with Turkey as well. And you're reminded of the blood spilt and the fighting and the pain, and these mountains that are at one point a refuge also are a place of complete destruction and suffering and pain. And you realize that the land carries that trauma, and the people generationally carry that trauma. And you talked about your work, and you touched on it just now briefly, in Africa, in particular Uganda, and then you came to Iraq to really address that acute crisis that was happening, in particular with ISIS and the Syrian conflict in general that had been going on for almost a decade, or 6 years before that. Can we kind of rewind your journey a little bit? I mean, what takes you from, I understand it, kind of a family-run clinical psychologist to taking your family to Africa and founding Tutapona? Tell me, I'd love to hear that story. If you could do that in 5 or 10 minutes. I know that's the really hard thing to do, is to kind of give you that time frame. But if you can just kind of give us that little journey that you took on, be great.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, my wife and I, Julie, we didn't set out to start an organization. We had no plans of starting an organization. We had studied social work because we did want to help people. We wanted to be in a profession where what we did mattered. We didn't want to just get a job and make money. We wanted to be involved in helping people. So we both studied social work, got our master's degree. We had various jobs in all different kinds of settings, and our work just kind of became more and more clinical. And we were licensed psychotherapists. Eventually, we opened a private practice doing individual and marriage and family therapy. I also worked at an outpatient clinic for a full-time job, and so I had a really good pay, good benefits. We had a nice house, 2 nice cars, 2 beautiful daughters, and life was good.
Sounds pretty good, man. That sounds like the American dream right there.
Yeah, life was good. We were involved in a good church, and At this point, Julie was staying at home with our two young daughters, so I was 2 minutes away from home. I could come home for lunch every day, hang out with my beautiful family, go back to work. It was really good. But then we heard about this situation in northern Iraq, and we heard about this. It just
Do you mean northern Uganda?
Something inside of us broke. I'm sorry, I mean northern Uganda. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Northern Uganda. So at that time, this was around 2005, 2006, there was the rebel group, the LRA, or Lord's Resistance Army, that was just wreaking havoc on northern Uganda. And they were doing things that were inconceivable to me at the time. I mean, the rebels were doing things like cutting off people's lips, cutting off their nose or their ears. They were, of course, taking over whole villages, raping and looting, and they were taking young children as child soldiers. And there were reports that there were between 35 and 50,000 children in northern Uganda taken as child soldiers, and the girls as sex slaves. And every night, children would commute in to town centers, like the town of Gulu, to try to seek shelter and be safe. There were thousands of children every single night leaving their homes, their mothers and their fathers, just to sleep under verandas and in bus parks and in hospitals just to try to be safe. And the Acholi people in northern Uganda were caught in the middle of this. The UN, under the United Nations Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, called it the world's worst unattended humanitarian crisis. Mm-hmm. When Julie and I heard about this, like I said, it just felt like something broke inside of us. It felt like, how can we not do something? We have to do something. Now that we know, we can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend that we didn't hear about this. So I wanted to make a trip there and see for myself what was going on, what the situation was like. 90% of the population, or 2.1 million people, were living in IDP camps, internally displaced people camps. So I finally found somebody that was going there, and I made a trip at the end of 2006. And I went to these IDP camps, and I saw what was happening. And the UN was there, and there was food distribution, and there was clothing and housing, but there was nobody addressing the emotional effects of their experiences. So came back, and in 2007 I took Julie there, and in 2008 we just sold everything and we moved to Uganda, and we started Tutapona with the sole purpose of addressing the emotional effects of war and conflict. So Tutapona existed for the sole purpose of doing mental health and psychosocial support with communities that were affected by war and conflict. And I say that we had a good life in America, but we cashed it in for a great life by going to Uganda and by being involved in this work. And there was just nothing like meeting with people in IDP camps, in their home, out under a mango tree, just providing a group-based trauma rehabilitation program. And there's just nothing like coming back at the end of that 2 weeks, and people that were suicidal at the beginning of that program, people that were ready to kill themselves, would be dancing for joy and singing as I pulled into the village. And there was just something incredible about being in that setting, what the UN was calling the world's worst unattended humanitarian crisis, and bringing healing and restoration. And so that's really how Tutapona started.
Carl, you're giving me goosebumps as you tell, and I've heard you tell this story a few times already, and it brings me back to those moments of being with families in Iraq as well, and the incredible richness and fullness of life of being able to walk alongside those people. Now, I know for you, this became very personal in a very special way for you as a family when you came across a special girl who you would later take on to be your daughter. And I'd love for you to share the fullness of that story, because it is just so beautiful, and I think just ties in so well to, you know, the work that you're doing and who you are. And I forgot to mention not just a daughter, a son or grandson.
Yeah.
But I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, this really was a miracle. You know, being in that setting in northern Uganda, there were thousands and thousands of children that we were surrounded by that had been child soldiers, that had been abducted, that had been taken to the bush, that had gone through horrific experiences. Thousands of children that were night commuters. But God brought one girl into our path. She was 14 years old, and she was pregnant at the time. And something just clicked, and God told us that this is that we're supposed to help this girl. And, you know, you can't help everybody. There's thousands of children there that have been deeply affected and hurt in terrible ways. But God just told us that we were supposed to help this one. So we got involved in her life, and we met with some social workers that were really asking for help and said, could you be involved? So we pursued with we approached her and just said, look, we heard about your situation. We don't know if there's anything we can do to help, but we just want you to know that we'd love to help if we can. And we didn't know if that meant just paying for her hospital bills so she could give birth in a hospital, or what that looked like. But as we ended up meeting with her and some of her family members that were around, it seemed like there was much more that was needed than that. She had been raped and by a 21-year-old when she was 14, and her uncle that she was living with was physically abusive. And when we showed up at her mud hut, we literally had to drive. There's one person who knew where she was, and so he drove us, and we drove down a dirt road and turned off for miles and turned off that to a little dirt path, a footpath really. We drove down that with our car as far as we could drive until we couldn't go anymore, got out and walked a bit further, and she was literally there barefoot and pregnant and cooking out over a fire on a big pot, trying to care for 9 children that her auntie had that she was responsible to care for. And anyway, we met with the government, and they said, you can foster her, and so take her to Kampala. And so we did, and she lived with us. We pursued guardianship. We got legal guardianship. She came to our family when she was pregnant, and she gave birth 6 weeks later to a beautiful boy. Elijah is his name. Mm-hmm. And there were so many miracles in this story along. I can't share them all, but a couple of quick ones. Uganda has a law that you can't adopt unless you fostered them for 3 years. You've had physical custody of the child for 3 years. So we said, well, okay, we'll do that. She'll be 17 at the time, but we'll do that. We'll abide by the laws of Uganda. Well, we went to the U.S. Embassy at one point to try to get her a visa to travel home with us to America one summer, and they denied it. But we were talking to the consular, and she told us, by the way, you realize that the U.S. will never recognize your adoption unless it's finalized before her 16th birthday. So I didn't realize that, and so I left there right away and called an attorney and said, is there any way? This was 6 days before her 16th birthday.
My. Wow.
And there was no way that this would happen. There's no way. It wasn't even possible for that to happen. But it did. The day before her 16th birthday, the Uganda courts finalized adoption, and then that was recognized. And then another miracle was for her to get U.S. citizenship. She had to be we had to have had adopted her for 2 years, and she had to be under 18. So we literally had a one-day window where we could apply for her to get U.S. citizenship as a child of U.S. citizens. and that all worked out. And so there were just numerous miracles along the way. But Judith is an amazing. She's now 24 years old. She's doing incredible. She's living here in the U.S. with us, and her son Elijah is, technically my grandson, but really he's my son.
Yeah.
I'm the only father he's really ever known, and he calls me dad. I coach his little soccer teams, and I coach his basketball team, and we hang out all the time. And he lives with us. He's now 9 years old. Just a beautiful, amazing boy. And both Judith and Elijah have been a huge blessing to our family.
Oh man, when I got the chance to visit you guys, gosh, when was that? A year or so ago, I can't remember now, but in your home, and just to see both Judith and Elijah, it's a great little setup. They've got their own kind of like granny flat, kind of own separate living area where they kind of do life together, but it's just so intertwined with you. And he's racing around on his rollerblades, and Judith is such a mature girl. It's just incredible. The hope and the joy in your family was just something special to witness and to see. But as you share, there's a lot of hard work, a lot of hurdles, a lot of obstacles, a lot of, hey, we need a miracle in that. Man.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank Judith too, and Elijah. I know that's a gift to be able to be willing for that story to be shared to others and to our listeners. Yeah.
Yeah, and I tend to forget even sometimes all that Judith has gone through. I mean, she's doing incredibly well, and but I forget all that she's gone through sometimes. Yeah. Being shot at by the rebels, being chased by the rebels, having to sleep out overnight in the bush, hiding out as the rebels are approaching, being in an orphanage, sleeping in night community centers, being homeless, living on the streets. I mean, just all that she's gone through, it's unbelievable, but she's doing incredibly well. It's just amazing to see how she's grown and matured.
Oh, man. It does. And just, when you just talked, I had this picture of her just, squatting barefoot on the ground, trying to cook dinner for 9 other children that are in her care at such a young, tender age. What resilience, what courage, and to think of these things, it kind of reminds me of the very heart of what Tutapona is all about right now. It's about delivering these programs of resilience to those that have lost everything, lost their homes, whether they be refugees or victims of war. And we had the opportunity when we first met on that rooftop of talking about delivering this groundbreaking program called Grow, which takes this idea, and I'll let you as the trained professional here explain this, takes this idea of post-traumatic growth, this idea of cultivating resiliency in the face of trauma, in the face of suffering, and before it takes root in people's lives. So one, maybe you could introduce this program Grow, and you've kind of got a new I don't know if you can or want to talk about program for children as well, Heroes, that really harnesses this idea of post-traumatic growth, and maybe give us a bit of a scientific and psychological breakdown of what that is too. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, man, Tim, you did a good job. I should leave it to you to explain it. But yeah, it's really that idea that, when trauma affects us, when we're impacted by significantly stressful events, negative events, oftentimes we get knocked backwards. And so with that, there develops a lot of times these negative symptoms, things like nightmares, night terrors, flashbacks, anxiety, depression. And so oftentimes what we try to do is then alleviate the symptoms of that trauma. Try to help people sleep better at night, try to help them not have nightmares, reduce anxiety, things like that. But that's I don't want to say it's hopeless, but that's not very encouraging to try to just, if all you're doing in life is trying to stop the negative things from happening. But instead, this idea of post-traumatic growth is actually saying that, yes, these events are terrible, they're awful, they're horrible events that we would never wish on anybody. But if they could be used as a catalyst for growth in the person's life, we can take something awful and see how really good things can come out of that. This idea started, I first kind of heard about this idea years ago when I was in graduate school. I was living and working on the East Coast, going to graduate school, and I was doing work at Yale New Haven Hospital. And I was working in the oncology ward with patients that were dying from terminal illnesses, cancer, AIDS, and so my job was to do individual and family counseling for them and their family members around grief and end-of-life issues. And I remember meeting with somebody who said, cancer was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I thought, what? Like, here you are in a hospital, but literally dying, like you're literally going to die any minute, and you're saying that this is the best thing that ever happened to you, and you wouldn't trade it for anything. And, they would say things like, I used to be just a terrible husband, a terrible father. I didn't care about anybody but myself. I just cared about my job. I was just working all the time. But this diagnosis, this cancer, forced me to be the husband that I should have been, forced me to be the father that I should have been. And it's given me the opportunity to reconcile with my children and restore those relationships. So
wow.
In my early days of coming to understand post-traumatic growth a little bit, that was sort of the framework from which I could see it through and see that even something that I would say is a terrible thing, cancer, if it can change the trajectory of my life and help me to actually grow as a result of it, then maybe there's something positive out of that. And so when we started developing this new program called Grow, as I started diving into the research around post-traumatic growth, and Robbie and I, as we were looking at this in the early stages of starting to try to develop Grow, man, I was really drawn to that literature around post-traumatic growth. And what if there's ways that we could help people to use this as a catalyst for growth in their life? And so the research would show that, yes, people get knocked backwards, but there's one group of people that when they get knocked backwards like that, they just kind of stay stuck there in that place, and they never really move back. And then there's a second group of people that when they get knocked backwards, they can kind of scratch and claw and fight, and they can work their way back to a baseline, work their way back to the point where they were before that experience happened. But then there's a third group of people that the research would show that when they get knocked backwards, this third group of people, their life enters a different trajectory, and they actually move beyond where they ever would have been had the trauma not occurred. Now, this is, of course, the research shows these are people with or without therapy. This is not necessarily counseling did that for them. Some people just inherently grow through those traumatic experiences. And so we said, okay, well, what is it about that group of people? We want to look at that group and say, what's different about them? Why would they grow? And by the way, it's not growing in spite of the trauma. It's actually growing because of the trauma, that the trauma becomes that catalyst for the growth. So when we looked at that group of people, the research would show that they possess certain characteristics. And so we said, well, what if we could help develop those characteristics in people, knowing that those people that possess those characteristics, they're more likely to grow as a result of those traumatic experiences. So that's what the Grow program really is all about, is about helping to try to facilitate those personal characteristics that will facilitate growth. Now, those characteristics are things like courage, hope, kindness, gratitude, being grateful for the things that I have. Those people that focus on those things that are good in their life that they have to be grateful for really are much more likely to grow. Those that are kind, they get outside of themselves, and they're not just focused on all that I've been through, but they say, look at this person. This person could really use some help, and they reach outside of themselves, and they extend kindness to somebody else. And then the final characteristic is a belief in a God who cares about me. So those are the characteristics that we look to try to help foster.
What is unique about the way it's delivered too? I mean, I think that's something that's really, and I don't know if you were going to go there, that's something that I've found really powerful and helpful. A lot of people think this kind of work is done one-on-one in counseling or therapy sessions, that you kind of really need that, but there's something beautiful about it being done in community. Maybe you could even just the way it's facilitated. It's just, yeah, I'd love for our listeners to hear some of that too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, very, very early on, right when I landed in Uganda, I realized I cannot do therapy with an Acholi person who speaks a different language, from a different culture, who's been through vastly different experiences than I have, being chased by the rebels and so forth. And so really the best thing that I can do is to help train and equip a team of local leaders who could facilitate the language and the program in their own language, in their own culture, with their own people. And so that's what we set off to do, was to train and equip a local team of staff, and then provide ongoing supervision and staff development for them, and just empower them to really do this program. And it's a group-based program, so there's something really beautiful about coming together as a group, because we all need one another. And building community, restoring community, having people rely on and count on one another has been amazing. In Uganda, we typically just meet out under a mango tree and gather people together, and we do a group-based program for 10 sessions, so 2 weeks, 5 days a week, and being led by our local staff. And our local staff often aren't even professional counselors. Oftentimes we think, a master's degree to be able to do this. Well, I went to Uganda thinking, look, if I can train people up to do a program like this, they just need to be teachable. They need to be ready to learn, and they need to be willing to just care for those people that are around them and part of this group. And so it's worked out extremely well, just training up lay facilitators, but they become very skilled at doing a program like this and being able to work the group dynamics.
Yeah, and you've, as a result, then been able to spread your work all throughout Uganda, even into Sudan, and then now into obviously the Middle East, in particular northern Iraq. And I just love the vision, the vast vision, the great vision you have to really take this work, this critical work, even beyond our shores. Even we've been able to adopt it here in Australia. I mean, it's such a privilege to be able to facilitate this program with refugees that have now resettled here and are rebuilding their life, just like your daughter Judith with her son Elijah. They're rebuilding their life, and they're getting the tools that they need to keep looking forward. I know you've got plans to even deliver it throughout America. Like you said, there's no place, I don't think, on this planet where the value and the powerful lessons that come through this course cannot be put to use. Can you touch on this new venture we've got, which was why I was on a call with you last night, that's really wanting to take it to children as well, to really kind of realize, hey, look, let's not wait till kids are adults, and a lot of this stuff is really set in their life and experience. And can you talk about the hero's journey?
Yeah, that's right. I'm super excited about this children's program now. So for a long time, I was nervous about doing a children's program. I didn't feel like I was a child therapist. I've gone through trainings on doing therapy with children and on play therapy, but I never felt like I was specifically a child therapist. And so I was hesitant to jump into that. So for years, we were asked to try to look at doing a program specifically for children. And for years, children were trying to get into our adult programs, especially in Uganda. They would kind of sneak in. And finally, it just got to a point where we said, look, yeah, we've got to do this, especially Uganda being one of the youngest countries on the planet, with 50% of the population being under 15 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
75% of the population is under 25.
Wow.
So, and the children have grown up knowing nothing except war and conflict. Many of the refugees that we were working with in the camps had been there their entire life, the children, and they'd never known any different. So we realized, look, it's time. We've got to do this. So we worked and we developed this Hero's Journey children's curriculum, really out of this same post-traumatic growth literature, using cognitive behavioral therapy as well. And I'm really excited about this because when we can change that trajectory of a person's life when they're so young, and even if you change it just a little bit over the course of 10 years, 20 years, man, that child is now in a completely different place than they otherwise would have been. And giving them the tools and the resources to really be able to address those experiences when they happen, build up that resiliency. So, and then, like you said, Tim, this idea of being able to be in multiple places, man, God just showed me early on that this is not about me. Like, this cannot be about me, and it shouldn't be about me. And so the earlier on that I could just let go of all of that, and then it frees me to empower other folks and train and equip them to do the work, because it's never been about me to begin with. This is all about how can we take this to as many people as possible. Now, I wish that I would be out of a job someday. If there were no more war or conflicts on the planet and I was out of a job, I would be the happiest man alive. But I just don't see that happening. There is no shortage of need for people to receive emotional healing for the wounds that they've incurred through violence. So, I just want to look at how can we get it to more people in more places around the world.
As we talk, even now, I think there's just so much excitement in me that's like, man, yes, let's do this, Carl. We can do it. And I've just so valued the ways that we've been able to partner and work together to achieve some of that in the Middle East and here in Australia. And but even as we talk, and there's this like passion and excitement, there's also this kind of stark realization that it's a lot of hard work. And you're co-founders of this organization. You're trying to raise the support yourself to be able to do this. There's no kind of bottomless cash pit that just enables you to do whatever you feel, and you feel like there's just no end to the need. If only there were resources to do that. And I think of some of the people that might be listening and thinking, yes, I want to help, I want to serve, I want to get into this. And even myself with the work that we're trying to do here, there can be some discouraging moments of thinking, man, I've got all this vision, I want to be able to do this, but somehow it just seems like pushing a cart uphill. Can you kind of talk into getting real a bit, I guess, here, and talk into some of those experiences? And I don't want to kind of shift the mood too much because I'm loving ultimately, I'm with you. I'm like, I want to get off this call and get back on the phone and dream up some plans. But maybe talking to some of the real discouraging low moments and maybe what got you through them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, talking about money is always a buzzkill. It's always just really discouraging. But it does feel like pushing a cart uphill. But those exciting times they do come, and it's always when somebody gives, right when we needed it. Like there's been numerous times where we are just about out of money. We just about need to lay people off, and somebody comes through, a donor, and saves us. And it's stressful for me living on that edge where I'm teetering on the point of of having to close shop. I don't like that. It's super uncomfortable for me. I don't live my life like that in my personal life.
What do you do when you feel that? What do you do when that thought comes through your mind? I mean, that's almost like the worst. So, I mean, for me personally, thinking, oh, this might be the end of everything we've poured our lives into, and we know this is what this world leads right now, but somehow it looks like it's coming to an end. What is that like?
Yeah. Well, for me, Tim, our faith is extremely important to us, and so this work is from the very beginning. It's all been God's work.
Yeah.
And He's got the resources. So, I just know He's going to come through. I just know God's going to come through. But it is stressful for me, and maybe I don't have enough faith. Maybe there's a faith issue, and I just need to have more faith, and I wouldn't get stressed about it. But I still manage to find myself getting really stressed at times. But in my heart, I know that God's going to come through, and He's going to provide. And if He doesn't, it's His work anyways. It's not mine. And so if He wants it to close down, we'll close down, and I'll go do something else. That's not a problem. But I do feel ownership of it. I do feel like this is our baby, Tutapona, that we've nurtured, that we've developed, we've grown, and have poured into. But on the other hand, I do hold it loosely that this is God's, and I would love to see Him use it for His glory, however, wherever He wants. And so we're trusting in Him to provide the resources for that. But it does get difficult. What we're trying to do now is have some of these what we call stones of remembrance, like these times where people have come through. I've got to just start writing them down. We've got to document them, because there's been numerous times where we are on the brink of collapse and somebody comes through. God provides. And so going back and remembering those, looking at those times, that's really an encouragement. Now, not only do we not have money to do it, but usually this is when God calls us to expand. Like we don't even have the money to do what we're currently doing. We don't know where it's going to come from. And now, God, you're saying expand to this place. Like, so when we do, and then God shows up and God provides, you know that it was all God. You know it was a miracle. So that's a privilege. Seeing miracles, seeing God show up, that is an absolute privilege. And so those difficult times get wearing on me, but man, I just get so pumped and energized when we just see God show up and do a miracle. Yeah. Who gets to do that, Tim? Who gets to see God showing up like that, right?
I think too, it's really important, because I think there's other people out there wanting to launch out, wanting to help people, wanting to maybe start a similar work, wanting to go to Africa or whatever it is, that their heart is set on this, and to know that, hey, even decades into this, it's still going to be tough. You're still going to have to, hold tight. Challenges, and it might not be money. It could be relational issues that come up, or health, or whatever the circumstances that can rock rock us in this work, to have that courage to move forward. It's something I appreciate, and I think you really do a great job in speaking into. So thanks for being candid about just the real struggles, those moments you have where you feel like it could end.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. No, I appreciate that. It does get tempting, as you grow and you get larger in size, to say, oh yeah, we relied on faith back then, but now we're bigger, and now I need to do this and I need to do this, and we need to put this practice in place. But I've just realized that for us, and I think this probably holds true for everybody, but faith is the answer. We're just trusting in God to provide, and that's been from the beginning. And when things are at their worst, that's the time to double down on faith. Now that's the time to say, okay, this is what we're called to do, is to step out in faith. So now when it seems like it makes even less sense than ever before, that's the time we got to double down on that. That's the time we got to really, really dive into it, because it's either we're going to go down in a ball of flames, or something miraculous is going to happen here. One of the two, but it's not going to be mediocre. It's not going to be in the middle. So God, we're just trusting in you.
Yeah.
And we're going to put it all now. So, and I love seeing God show up in that place. What a privilege that is, seeing God show up in that way. But we're so many times we miss it because we get afraid and we pull back and we say, oh, well, so we step back from that.
Yeah, we give into the fear. We give into we shrink back. And dude, just the other day, I just had this real stressful moment, and I just was just really overwhelmed, really stressed about a certain situation. And I just remember having to go down. I'm fortunate enough to live near the beach, and just go down and just sit and contemplate. And a good friend of mine just said, look, this is when you need to lean into trust and faith in this moment, right? Trust and faith now, when your stomach is churning, when your mind is thinking it's like losing hope, or it was just one of those kind of moments. And then there's this picture that came into my mind of, like, how the eagle kicks the baby out of the nest when it's trying to teach it to fly. I mean, it just seems like the cruelest thing you could possibly do is to, like, kick this little, baby eagle out of a nest to plummet to its seemingly death. Yet it's in that moment when it learns to fly. And so many times I would have resigned to comfort and resort to, well, I'm just going to medicate right now with chocolate or TV or whatever else that kind of, calling a friend and to complain. Or I can lean into, like, I'm going to be still. I'm going to trust it's going to be okay. And just maybe, like, this could be the catalyst for me actually going to that next level. Can you think of an experience like that for you, where suddenly it's like, wow, this is amazing? One of the highest highs that you had, which I'm sure probably was preceded by, some real, like, challenge or difficulty. Is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe even just some of the highs and what you've done, or some of the story of someone that just blew you away.
Well, one of the first times that we expanded in Uganda, we expanded up into South Sudan. We kind of followed the LRA as they got pushed out of Uganda and into South Sudan. So we went up into South Sudan to start an office. And, it was just a really difficult process. When I was moving my staff member up there to South Sudan, we literally got 3 flat tires going up to South Sudan. We had to come back to Gulu one day to get the tire fixed because we didn't have another spare. So Then went the next day. We went a different route up into South Sudan through a different border crossing. It was rainy season. We got stuck in the mud. And this remote border, the guard was, trying to shake us down for more money, didn't let us pass, and it's all kinds of stuff. We ended up getting stuck in the mud numerous times on the way up there. Finally got to this village that we were going to about midnight, and just exhausted. Been driving all day, all through the night. Get there at midnight. Somebody lets us sleep in their mud hut for the night. This family gets out and lets us sleep in the mud hut. We wake up in the morning and open the curtain to this mud hut and step outside. And it was a beautiful sunny day, beautiful mountains in the background, and exit out of this mud hut. And we just knew it's right. This is what we're supposed to do. Like we persevered through all of that the night before, the couple of days before, just trying to get up there to South Sudan. And it all worked out, and the sun was shining, and it was just this amazing feeling of peace, knowing we're supposed to be here, and the lives that are going to be transformed because we persevered and because we're here. So that was just one story. And of course, when we moved to Iraq, that was amazing as well. When we expanded in Uganda to Adjumani Refugee Settlement, when this wave of South Sudanese refugees started coming down in 2014, we did not have the money to go up there, but we knew this was the biggest refugee crisis on the planet right now at this point. We have to do something, and we didn't have the money to do what we were currently doing. We were way behind on budget, but we went ahead and expanded up into Adjumani and had a real hard time with various issues up there and with vehicles breaking down and office and stuff. But then it all worked out, and we got the money, and that ended up being an incredible office for us.
Wow.
And then, of course, moving to Iraq, my kids loved Uganda. We spent 8 years in Uganda. Yeah. My daughters, one of them has spent half her life there. The other one spent 2/3 of her life in Uganda. We had community. We had friends. We had our life was there. But then we sold everything in Uganda and moved to Iraq. And I went there a month before my family to get us situated with a house and a car and stuff. And then when my family arrived, it was just, and that day I was down in Erbil waiting for them to come, and I downloaded some different UN reports and things. And I was reading this report about the Yazidi and all of the things they'd gone through and testimonials of people. And I remember sitting there in Erbil, and I was just weeping at these testimonials, these stories of what these women had been through with ISIS. And my family was arriving, and I was just so glad we were there to do this work, to work. That's why we exist. That's why Tutapona exists. Like, this is why I'm on the planet right now, is to do this work. And so then going and picking up my family and taking them home. And it was just the most incredible feeling. Like, we're here, we're doing it. We get to be involved. We get to be part of the healing. We get to be part of the restoration of communities and of families and of individual lives. And that was just the most incredible feeling when my family arrived. And literally a week later, my girls loved it. They loved Iraq. They said, we would pick, if we could pick be in Uganda or here, I think we would pick here.
Wow.
And they had loved that was their home. So that was an incredible experience, that my family was so happy. They were loving that they could be in the work too, because we were so close, and that we were right where we were supposed to be.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a great adventure. It's been a great journey of just watching God move and watching God do miracles.
Well, Carl, we kind of are coming to a close here. And I was thinking, just as, again, bringing me back to Iraq, and I remember when you landed by yourself and were waiting for your family to come. I remember catching up with Bill there, and in such a short period of time, able to accomplish so much, to be able to set up an office there that is still running today. We met with the team last night over Zoom, doing some further training. But both of us kind of out in our families, we had to leave it at a very similar time and moment. And it wasn't an easy decision for either of us to kind of to leave. The work continues in both what we have done, and we find ourselves here in the West again. Some would say strategically, so you can continue to grow and expand and not maybe be so tunnel visioned into one location. But COVID has kind of made things difficult for us to kind of, and for you in particular, to get out there. And I know that's really difficult. But without kind of harping too much on that and making so much of that, I'd love for you just to maybe just as we wrap things up, talk a bit about what's on the horizon. What are some ways that if people are interested in learning about what Tutapona has planned, could you just give us a snapshot of what you're up to now that you're back here, rebuilding, reharnessing? Are you thinking about moving it again, or can you let us in on any little secrets, or just inspire us as to what you see on the horizon?
Yeah, sure. I do feel like I'm strategically placed here. I do believe that God brought us back, my family, to the U.S. As the CEO of the organization. It's just difficult to oversee all of the work when I'm running a country office in one location. So even though my family hated it when we moved back, we hated it. And I felt like I was, throwing a temper tantrum like a spoiled little child, saying, God, why? I want to be in Iraq. But I can see now that this is probably a good place for us to be. Some of I want to expand anywhere there's a need. I would go anywhere that there's a need. I would love to see us expand in the Middle East. I think there's a lot of areas going on there. I would love to see us in places like Afghanistan or Pakistan, places where they maybe don't have the best view of Americans. They maybe aren't used to Americans coming and providing help or peaceful solutions. I would love to go places like that. I would love to be in Greece, where refugees are just getting off the boats on a place like Lesbos. We've talked about South America with some of the conflicts that are going on there at the border of Venezuela and Colombia. Venezuelans are fleeing and into Colombia. Is there a way that we could provide relief there? We do have some work going on here in the United States. We opened an office in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, to try to work with refugees and immigrants that have come here. We would love to expand that and do more. Just last Sunday, a week ago, I was in another part of Wisconsin, 4 hours away. I was contacted by a man who was resettled in that part of Wisconsin, 4 hours from me. He was a refugee from Congo, and he was in Nakivale Refugee Settlement in Uganda and went through Tutapona's programs. Wow. So he contacted me here in the U.S., asked me to go over there. He said, we have a ton of refugees here in Appleton, Wisconsin, a lot of Congolese refugees, Somali refugees. And so could we do a program of Tutapona over there? So we're looking at potentially other places in the U.S. as well where there might be needs. But really our heart is to be overseas and operating in places where refugees have fled from war or conflict, and see how can we just be a light there, and how can we bring his love and his healing into those places.
Oh, man. Well, I'm hoping we can continue to be a part of that too, Carl. We are working together here, and was a privilege to have you. And I think Grace came with you and Julie when you came out that time. You've had a big year too in your, with your daughter Emma getting married, and there's just lots going on, and I can see just the goodness of God on your life as you've had this season back in the States. And I'm looking forward to just watching it grow, watching it expand, and hopefully getting in on the action with you, mate. It's just going to be, it's exciting. It really is.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And you too. Yeah, we're excited to be partnering with you guys and the great work that you're doing. Just can't wait to see where this all goes.
Look, if people want to learn more, if they want to support you guys, they want to give to your work, they want to offer their expertise or just help you in any way, where do they go? What can they do?
Yeah, the best way is our website, just tutapona.com. And by the way, I never really said it earlier, what Tutapona means. Tutapona is a Swahili word, and it means we will be healed. And just like all the stuff we were talking about with post-traumatic growth and just being future-minded and looking to the future, that, today might be terrible, but we will be healed. My tomorrow will be better than my today. And it's all about this, healing as a collective effort.
Yes.
The idea that it's not an individual pursuit. So we will be healed as Tutapona. So tutapona.com is the best place for people to go and find out more. Go to Facebook or Instagram and check us out there as well.
Man, Carl, it has been so good. You guys are on the front lines doing incredible work, and you really are bringing justice and hope and healing in some of the most darkest parts of the world, and you're bringing light, and I love it, and I'm so thankful to chat with you. I'm going to get you to stick around for a bit of a bonus round, which is what my dear Patreon guests get when they support the podcast and come behind us. So we'll continue that conversation in a bit. But for now, thank you so much for being on the Justice Matters podcast, Carl. Appreciate you.